This is Ron Climer. I am a real estate broker in Daytona Beach, Florida. And if your real estate in Florida is being foreclosed on, you need a little general understanding of what's going to happen next. And this is a broad overview, but in Florida, the first thing that happens when your property is foreclosed on is the deputy sheriff comes out and hands you a document called a complaint. And that's where the bank, as the plaintiff, is suing you for foreclosing on your mortgage. Now this process lately, and this varies from time to time. In fact, I was looking at a video I did 2 years ago, and I told people it takes about 8 to 10 months. Well, lately, it's taken probably closer to 16 months, probably, to get it closed, to get foreclosed. And if we get busier with foreclosures, I think that'll either continue to, well, it just varies from time to time. I've been doing this for 30 years, and sometimes it's been shorter, sometimes it's longer. But what's going to happen at the end of the story, let's just say it takes 20 months. So you're living in your house, and you haven't made a payment for about, correct me if I'm wrong, about 6 months. So 6 months ago, you made the last payment that you made, and well, let's say your payments are $2,000 a month. So your payments are $2,000 a month, and you hadn't made one for 6 months. Well, that's $12,000 you're behind. Sheriff just handed you a document that said you're being foreclosed on. Start making plans what you're going to do. And so, and that's exactly what happens. Now let me take a minute, and pardon me if I'm being too basic, but let me explain equity to you. Let's imagine that you bought your house in 2015. Today it's the middle of 2025, so it's 2025 now. You owned your house for 10 years, and when you bought your house back in 2015, in fact, let's change these numbers a little bit just so I can do them all in my head. Y'all notice I don't use many visual aids. I'm just like to talk to you, and I hope that's okay. But imagine, if you will, in 2015, you bought this house for $100,000. When you bought the house for $100,000, let's say you bought it for $110,000. So you put $10,000 down, and you got a $100,000 mortgage. So you signed a mortgage that said, I owe you $100,000, and I'm going to pay you back $600 a month, principal and interest. You're going to pay interest on the money. Let's see. It's $100,000, 6%, that's $6,000 a year. Divided by 12, that's $500. So you're paying $500 a month interest. You're paying $100 a month principal reduction. So your principal will go down every month. Next month, you won't owe $100,000. You'll only owe $99,900. And the next month, you'll owe $99,795 because you pay a little bit more principal the second month, the third month, the 25th month. And so your principal that you're paying reduces your mortgage. That's called amortization. Now, most places you make your payments PITI. That's principal and interest, the $600, plus you have to pay your taxes to the bank. Now the reason the bank wants you to make the tax payments to them is because they know that the tax bills come out in November. And it's a little bit of a burden for most people if they have to shell out $1,200 or $1,500 or $2,000 or $3,000 for their taxes, especially right there in the Christmas season. So they just want to collect it from you by the month. So and the same thing with insurance. Your insurance is going to come due on the anniversary of your house. So whenever you bought your house this time next year, and today, you've seen some stuff on TV that insurance in Florida has become some serious business, serious amounts of money. So you're making your payments PI, $600. T, let's say your taxes are $1,200. That's another $100. And let's say your insurance is well, let's say it's $1,200, but it's probably a lot more than that. So there's another, so you're paying your $800 a month payment to the bank every month. But here you are, and you were met with some sort of unexpected thing. And it does seem like that a lot of foreclosures are caused by death of a spouse. And by the way, this is none of my business in this, but if you are making mortgage payments and you don't have life insurance, you should buy some life insurance on your spouse's life. Don't worry about yours. Get some on your spouse's life before the sun sets today. Get some life insurance, at least enough to pay off that mortgage. It's just, I see people all the time, man and his wife, 2 kids, 6 and 8 years old. Dad dies, unexpected, car accident or something. No insurance, not a nickel's worth. Buy some insurance on your spouse today. If you don't have any, get some. And don't think you have any when you don't. Be sure you have some. Job loss. I know more, been out to talk to a ton of people through the years, lost their job. They had a job making good money, living large, members of the country club, life is good. And presto changeo, they got fired or downsized or whatever. Prison. I've talked to a couple of people where somebody got put in prison and all of a sudden divorce. Same thing, man and his wife, they're doing good together, making that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month house payment, but all of a sudden they get divorced. Now they both want an equally nice house. And another thing is just other debt. I've been out to see people, their house where they live is being foreclosed on, and they got a boat sitting out there in the backyard. A boat. And I've had more than one say, oh no, the payments are current on that boat. Okay, well good, I'm glad to hear that you're going to have a nice place to boat around when you're living in somebody else's garage. But these are things that cause people to go to foreclosure. And of course, death of a spouse being a big one today. And so the deputy sheriff shows up, hands you a complaint. Now, by the way, when the deputy sheriff hands you that complaint, you're already 6 months behind. And you need to take a long, hard look at your choices, because I go out and talk to people all the time, and they say, oh no, Ron, we got the situation under control. We're going to get the money. How much money do you need? Well, let's say your payments are $800 a month. Well, and you haven't paid them for 6 months. Obviously, you're having a tough time. You can't tell me you're not having a tough time if you haven't made a payment for 6 months. But 6 times 800 is $4,800. You got to have $4,800 plus, when the sheriff hands you that summons, you've already got about $500 in attorney fees, and they click off by the day. They click off by the hour. Every time the attorney licks an envelope, it costs you money. And so you got to do something. One of your choices. And this is a wonderful choice if you can do it. Get the $4,800 together, sell your car, sell your airplane, sell your boat, sell your travel trailer, sell your fifth wheeler. I hate to say this, sell your motorcycle. Oh, no, it's not that bad. But get some money together and catch up those payments. That's the best thing to do. Especially if you bought the house in 2015 for, say, $200,000. That thing's probably worth $450 today. At least that's true in Daytona. And you can't let it go back to the bank. So get the money together and pay it up. But what if you can't? What if you couldn't get your hands on $4,800 if the world would stop turning? Well, your second choice is sell the house. Well, here's what a lot of people want to do. They want to sell the house, but they don't want to do it until later. Now, you remember that $800 a month payment I told you that you haven't made for 6 months? That payment's due next month. and the month after that, and the month after that, and the month after that. You have the interest comes due every single month. The taxes, they don't stop just because you quit making your mortgage payments. The insurance, you say, oh, the insurance, yeah, that stops. It stops, but it's replaced by something worse. It's replaced by what they call mortgagees insurance or forced insurance. What happens is the bank says, oh, this house is not insured because you're not making the payments. They don't have the money to pay your insurance, so they buy their own insurance. It doesn't protect you. If the house burns down, you're not going to get a nickel. What's going to happen is the bank's going to get paid off. Well, gee, that must be cheaper than regular insurance. No, it's not cheaper. It's about twice or three times as expensive as regular insurance. And so, by the way, take this piece of advice. No matter what you do, you make sure your house is insured, because if it's not, instead of it costing you $100 a month, it's going to be costing you $300 a month, and you don't even get the benefit of having the insurance. If the house should burn down between now and foreclosure, you're not going to get a nickel. And so you don't want that happening. I assume that everybody understands equity. But a lot of times, as I talk to people that are being foreclosed on, I feel like they don't. But in my example, I had you buy the house in 2015 for $110,000. Remember that? I said you put $10,000 down, and you owe the bank $100,000. Well, that $10,000 is called your equity. Well, every month you pay that mortgage down and down and down and down. So your equity goes down. Well, another thing that's happened, and this is always tied to the political climate somehow, but another thing that happens is we have the homes go up in value. It's called appreciation. And as I said, a house you bought for $110,000 in 2015 could very well be worth $300,000 today. So what happens is you're living in a $300,000 house that you owe maybe, if you've been paying on it for 10 years, maybe $75,000. You got $225,000 in equity. And folks, I have seen people sit right there in that house and do absolutely nothing till 20 months later, it's sold at auction. Now, when a house is sold at public auction, if it's what we consider a $300,000 house, we say, yeah, that's a $300,000 house right there. I could sell that to somebody for $300,000. But think about it. When I sell a house to somebody for $300,000, they go look at it. They fall in love with it. They're imagining how their furniture will look in it. They have a home inspection done. They have a roof inspection done. They have a septic tank inspection done. They get title insurance. They've got all kind of assurances that this deal is going to be okay, and the house is worth the $300,000. But when that guy buys a house at auction, at the public auction, it's not like that. What happens is, most likely, the investor that buys that house at the sales foreclosure auction, probably he's never been inside of the house. Probably he's certainly not had a roof inspection, termite inspection, home inspection, electrical inspection, septic tank inspection. He hasn't had any of these inspections because nobody has given him permission to do that, which is a normal seller would do that. But in a foreclosure auction, and the seller might still be living in the house, which means it might cost him $500, $1,500 to evict the people out of the property. And who knows? They could burn it down while they're in there. The last day they're there. You never know what's going to happen. So this is a very, very, very dangerous way to buy property. Very dangerous. In fact, it's not only dangerous, but you've got to pay cash. When somebody buys a house at an auction, at a foreclosure auction, you bid on Wednesday and you pay up by 10 a.m. on Thursday in Volusia County. That's noon in some counties, but it's always within 24, 48 hours max as far as I know. in every county in Florida. You got to pay up right now. So you got to have the money. There's no arranging financing or anything like that. You got to have the money. Now, considering that, if the house is worth $300,000, pretty good bet, $200,000 is the best bid you're probably going to get in. So here's what happens. 10, 12, 15 months from now, the house sells. And let's say for $200,000, okay? What did we say we owed? We owed about $75,000, but that $75,000 has turned into more money. Inspections from this guy done to the bank to make sure that the bank wants to mow the grass for you and get paid for it. And so the bank has done all kind of stuff. I have a video here on YouTube how to turn a $48,000 debt into a $98,000 debt. And it was an actual case that I looked at where the people owed $48,000, and when it went to foreclosure, about 8 or 9 months later at that time, they owed $98,000 to the bank, and the house sold for like $120,000. But now what happens, and y'all listen real carefully to this, what happens when the house sells at public auction on the courthouse steps in Volusia County, Florida, when that property sells, the person that bids on it, they pay the $200,000 to the clerk of the court. And if you're still living in the house, the sheriff comes and forcibly puts you out on the street. If you're not living in the house, that's good too. But either way, the money difference between those two is called surplus funds. And the person being foreclosed on is entitled to get that money if they ask for it. 80% of the people that are foreclosed on in the state of Florida don't ask for it. Now, don't be one of those 80% if you're going to hang in here to the end. So let me run your choices past you. You can stay in the house till the bitter end, get those surplus funds if there are any. You can get the money together, sell your boat, sell whatever you got to do to get the money together to catch up your mortgage. And if you do that, by the way, if you do that, you got to make the payments in the future. If you do that today and this time next year, you're 3 months behind already. Again, you can't do that. You got to change your lifestyle. If you don't have enough money to pay your $800 a month, you go out and you gather up $4,800 more and catch the thing up. You've got to keep those payments up. You've got to decide, I'm going to make these mortgage payments. If we sit here and starve to death, we're going to have a paid up mortgage. And so you got to do that. But be that as it may, I think choice number 2 for most people is the sensible choice. Now, pardon me, I might think that because I'm a realtor. Maybe that's why I think that. But I have seen so many people. They sit right there in the house till it's foreclosed on. And honest to Pete, even after it's foreclosed on, they don't have $500 in their pocket. What have they been doing for the 15 months that it was being foreclosed on? Because when you get out of here, you got to go somewhere. You got to live somewhere. And so, anyway, I think catch up your old payments. That's a good plan. Stay to the bitter end. That is the worst plan you can think of. Sell the house now, put some money in your pocket, and go find yourself a less expensive place to live where you can start over, regroup, get your breath, and get back in the mainstream. But, and if you want to do that, I'd love to help you with it. And by the way, I'd love to help you if you don't want to do that. If you just want to call and talk to somebody that understands this, give me a call. I understand it real well. I have been doing this literally since the 80s. And by the way, I mentioned your house being sold on the courthouse steps. They don't literally do that anymore. But back in the 80s, they did. That's the way they did it. And today, the auctions are online, but it's still the same process. And let me tell you something that's not a good choice. Just do nothing. Just put your head in the sand and say it ain't happening. It is happening. I've called plenty of people, and they said, Ron, my house is not being foreclosed on. And I'll show them their name right there on the sheet where I looked them up at the courthouse. And they said, well, that's got to be a typographical error or something. It's not a typographical error. So if I can help you, give me a call. If you're gonna catch your mortgage up, good for you. And stay in touch.